My grandfather had muscular dystrophy. He suffered every day from the pain of that disease. One of the things that we mistakenly say sometimes in the church is that God gives us suffering so that we might learn something. When I think about my grandfather, I cannot reconcile that God would do that to him so that he might learn. Maybe he did learn something from his daily suffering. I only knew him once he had the disease, so I can't talk about who he was before that. But my grandfather was gentle and humble. He embodied loving kindness. He was wise, and I loved him so very much. My grandfather spent most of his life either in his bed or in a reclining chair out in the living room of my grandparents' house. When I would come over and stay, I would ask to sit with my grandfather so he could read to me. I loved those moments of being snuggled up close to him. My grandmother would say, no, you can't sit with him because it will hurt him. And in my 6 or 7 or 8-year-old mind, I understood that intellectually, but I just wanted to be close to my grandfather. My grandma would leave the room and my grandpa would motion me over and sneak me up into his chair or next to him on the bed and read to me. My grandma knew what was happening, but she was just trying to protect her beloved husband from the extra pain that was caused when a wiggly 6-year-old was sitting right next to him. What I remember about those moments, though, were how close I felt to my grandfather and how loved I felt. And as an adult, when I look back, I understand that there was extra physical pain for him when he invited me up to sit by him, but that he loved me enough to endure that extra suffering so that we could be together. Many years later, as an adult, my husband Eric and I and our boys welcomed a foster daughter into our home. We expected that we would adopt her and she would be a part of our forever family. That was not the plan that God had in mind. She ended up going back to a biological parent and leaving our household. We grieved. We suffered. We cried and we longed for her to be a part of our family again. I spent many hours in prayer asking God why. Why had he invited her into our family if she wasn't meant to remain there forever? And the answer I got was that God never wastes love. That love we had showed her for the years she was with us, the stability our family provided, would be a part of her life forever. It is true that we suffered. But like the suffering of my grandfather when he invited me to sit next to him, it was not suffering for the sake of suffering. It had a larger purpose. It was a self-giving kind of suffering, a love that extended beyond our comfort to hold another person. When I think about Jesus, I think of Jesus as self-giving love come into the world, as perfect love, with no selfish agenda, with only the purpose of giving to each and every one of us, to the world, to all of creation, the love that God has for us. And that love ended up on a cross. The story of Good Friday tells us that love couldn't fully exist in this world and that we put it to death. And there was suffering. But the suffering on the cross isn't just suffering for the sake of suffering. That isn't the lesson we should take from it. We shouldn't look to the cross and say that in that suffering, God was trying to teach Jesus something, or that Jesus just suffered for no reason. It's a suffering that was about something more. It was about love that was given to us in spite of the pain that it caused. I can't answer all the questions about all the kinds of suffering that happen in this world. But I know that on the cross we see a particular kind of suffering that is redemptive, that is self-giving, that is about more than a selfish agenda. It's about the well-being of others and the well-being of the world. And when I go through times of my own suffering for the sake of another person, I look to the cross, just as I look back on those memories of my grandfather, for inspiration and reminder that my suffering isn't just about me. It's about offering something bigger to the world. We've all gone through a fair amount of our own suffering this year through the pandemic. I certainly can't explain all of the suffering we've endured. I don't know why God has allowed a global pandemic. I don't know why we've lost so many loved ones. But I look at some of the suffering we've endured. The year of staying home, the year of mask wearing, the year of giving up contact with loved ones, our normal routines of coming to church in a physical building on a Sunday morning, all of the comforts that we've forsaken, our kids who have not been in physical school, our teachers who have worked so tirelessly to make online learning possible, our doctors and nurses and counselors and frontline workers who've gone to work and showed up day after day, even when they are weary and tired. I look at that suffering and I understand that it was always about something more. We weren't suffering for the sake of suffering. We were making those sacrifices to keep our neighbors and our loved ones safe. Certainly our own safety was involved too in staying home, but even when we felt like we might be able to go out, we stayed home and we wore masks so that other people would be safe. That's what the cross means to me, is to do something that might cause sacrifice on our part, but benefits somebody else and brings love and healing into the world. I don't know when this pandemic will end. I don't know how much more suffering we have ahead of us. But one thing I do know, every time one of us has put a mask on, every time one of us has stayed home, every time one of us who is an essential worker has showed up at work, even though they're exhausted and tired, that is a part of the healing that God has been doing this whole time. That is a part of God's redemption of this pandemic time. And the cross means to me that even though I don't understand suffering all the time, I recognize that it is often a gift of love to make this world a better place for all who live in it. Amen.